You know, when you look back at NASA and the establishment of the Space Act in 1958, it's an important consideration to look at NASA's mission and the complications of balancing both the openness that's expected in a scientific and research innovation community and cooperation around the world with these really important security interests. And so for me, it really, raises a question about intent versus of the agency and the civil servants versus a culture that we need to work to change and shape so that there's more consideration of security, still respecting the overall mission of the agency. And I want to thank the witnesses for their testimony today. I especially want to commend Ms. Martin. I know that you are here and you're in your kind of waning days after 36 years of public service, and so I want to thank you for that. I'm reminded all the time, especially as one who represents a local congressional district here in the metropolitan Washington region in Maryland, about all of the important and valuable work of our civil servants wherever they fall. And so it leads me to the question about what is going on at the agency. So, Ms. Martin, I'd like to address this to you, if you would, and other witnesses, please chime in. I wonder if, in looking at the conclusions of your 3 reports, whether you conclude that the security witnesses that you found stem from an inconsistent application of policies and guidance on protecting sensitive information technologies and other assets of the agency and centers, rather than from a conscious disregard of security measures by NASA personnel.
Well, first, Ms. Edwards, I'd like to thank you for your very kind remarks, and it is indeed a pleasure to have this opportunity to testify before this committee, the subcommittees, a week before I'm actually due to retire. It has been indeed an honor and a pleasure to serve the Congress and the American public for 36 years, so thank you very much for that. And to your question, we certainly did not find any indications of overt attempts to circumvent policies and procedures. As we state in our report, there was certainly some lack of clarity in terms of the policies and procedures. And as you well know, NASA devolves a lot of responsibility to its centers. And so we found variations across those centers in terms of how they implemented policies and procedures. And no doubt accountability is important, but there was not any indication in terms of our work that someone went about deliberately trying to circumvent policies and procedures.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. And it then leads me, Mr. Webster, to a question for you, and that is around the culture at NASA and what you're doing, because it strikes me, and I worked at Goddard Space Flight Center, so I know this, the importance of devolving a lot of responsibilities to the agency, because in part that's what creates an environment of innovation and creativity. And so how do you then balance security concerns and preventing breaches of release of sensitive information with a culture in which you want to encourage innovation and creativity? What can you do to bring a lot more consistency to the application of these issues within the agency?
I believe that the cultural issues is perhaps one of the largest challenges being faced as a result of this review, because unlike information technology or policies that can be changed and so on, changing the culture is a long-term effort. It may be that NASA in the workforce looks at its mission as a set of objectives, and then the rest of what NASA has to do is sort of what they have to do in order to be able to execute the mission. And that would be unfortunate, and I suspect that's the case in many cases, because instead the housekeeping types of things that need to occur need to be viewed as part of the mission. So it's not this balancing, what do we have to put up with in order to achieve the mission? It's recognized as part of the mission. And going back to your earlier question, I would say that in my perception, and I believe it's reflected in our study, is that NASA has consistent policy, but it's inconsistently applied. And so that's where I think getting the culture to understand that's part of their mission is important.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you can indulge me with Mr. Brown's 30 seconds, I'd appreciate it.
I will.
So I want to go to Mr. Keegan. I mean, there's been some discussion about an oversight body such as the Internal Asset Protection Oversight Board that's been advocated by NAPA to oversee safety concerns. What is your view about the necessity and how NASA would view the necessity of standing up such a board?
We think that's a valuable recommendation, and we agree that that function would be useful to help us address challenges in this area, and we're looking to set up something along those lines that would be then report up to the agency's Mission Support Council to implement that recommendation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.